In 2015, the UN Economic Commission for Africa, through its African Climate Policy Center and the World Bank, published the report Enhancing the Climate Resilience of Africa's Infrastructure. The report found that, given the unfolding climate scenario, the likelihood of the Zambezi River Basin losing at least 60% of its hydropower production potential is very high. The Zambezi River Basin is the source of the Kariba Dam, a crucial hydroelectric infrastructure that has supplied Zambia and Zimbabwe with electricity since 1960. As the report had projected, the El Niño weather pattern caused a severe drought in 2015 and 2016, followed by prolonged dry spells between 2018 and 2020. Following the prolonged drought in November 2022, 7 years after the groundbreaking report, the Zambezi River Authority, which operates the Kariba Dam, would issue a warning that water levels had reached their lowest point.
We had the first ever flooded, which was happening in 1968-1969 season, which recorded the highest level of water, of which if I can give you that level we had, we cannot stay here or be in water. From there, we came to the 70s. It was also having a lot of water. We came to the 90s, the 80s, the 90s. The change started in the 90s. That's why we started seeing a bit of change of amount of water that is needed for generation started reducing. Until when we reached in the 20s. I remember that was 2008 when we had another surplus of water that was too much, and even at the dam we couldn't hold the water. We have to release it, and we even announced to the locals to say Zambezi River will open the spillway gate to release more water to pass so that the dam cannot burst or it cannot cause any danger. But I can tell you from that time in the early 20s to date, we have not done that.
Kariba generates 1,080 megawatts for Zambia and 1,050 megawatts for Zimbabwe. The Zambezi River provides the majority of Lake Kariba's inflow, accounting for 80%. Direct rainfall on the lake surface and tributaries provides the remaining 20% of the water. Both Kariba South and North Power utilities curtailed their average generation to 250 megawatts in December 2022 due to decreased water levels. As a result, Zimbabwe struggled through 19 hours of load shedding, while Zambia had to deal with a 6-hour power outages.
For about 5 years back, that's when we observed very serious declines in water level in the lake that had never been seen before. And that situation has continued until now. But that has huge implications now in terms of the productivity of the lake itself. We need a flooding, serious flooding to take place for the lake to fill up right now. Last year it was documented, I think around December. I think we had only a few days of power generation before we were cut off by the Zambezi River Authority to say, Kariba Power Station must stop power generation because there's a certain limit where the power station is not allowed to draw down water for power generation. If I recall, Zambia had to allocate part of its water quota to Zimbabwe to enable the power station to continue running.
Over the next decade, Africa will require an annual investment of up to $170 billion for long-lasting infrastructure such as roads, dams, irrigation systems, and power stations to close the continent's massive infrastructure services gap. In light of the enormous investment required to close these development gaps, the Africa Climate Investment Resilient Facility, AFRI-RES, was created to provide African stakeholders with the capacity and tools to integrate climate resilience in key sectors such as agriculture, energy, water, transport, cities, and ecosystems.
With the SDGs 2030 timeline just around the corner, there are still huge investment gaps to happen in Africa, in agriculture, in energy, in all these sectors that we mentioned. But for those investments to happen, we have to be sure that they will perform under future climate and also perform now, because we don't know what future climate there will be. And therefore we needed to do something to say, if you have a big gap to close with the investments on the continent, we know that Africa is being impacted the most by climate change, then those investments have to have some confidence that they will perform, otherwise the investors wouldn't come. And on the continent, we don't have the tools and the capacity to do that. And so as a progression from the AFRI, the Enhancing the Climate Resilience of Africa infrastructure work, we decided to establish AFRI-RES as a way of supporting that availability of that capacity and tools on the continent.
AFRI-RES consists of 4 components. The African Development Bank and the World Bank leads the Component 1 on technical assistance at the project level. The component is assisting project developers in drafting terms of reference that include specification for incorporating climate risk management actions into the structuring of public-private partnership agreements and contracts. The second component on outreach, dissemination and training, led by the UN Economic Commission for Africa and the African Union Commission, consists of 3 training programs organized both online and in person. The legacy training is offered for sector specialists, the private sector, legislators, media personnel, and civil society organizations.
We face a big risk as Africa develops. Are we developing for a world that will be drier? Do we develop a world that will be wetter? But one of the things we're seeing we're definitely going to see a world with more flooding. So when you're building a road, when you're building a bridge, if you're building a wetlands, how do we do it if we're not sure what the system's going to be? So there are techniques that exist called decision-making under uncertainty, and we're trying to bring that into the curriculum. So what we've been doing here is teaching them techniques about how to take risk into account. We're trying to understand how to make the good decisions in a very difficult situation in Africa. Growing demand on the order of $130 billion a year in infrastructure, unknown what are the risks of that infrastructure now and particularly in the future, and limited money.
The second training is specifically tailored to support the massive blueprint for infrastructure development in Africa, PIDA. PIDA, endorsed by the continent's head of state and government, is an ambitious long-term plan to close Africa's infrastructure divide through over 400 PIDA initiatives, including 54 hydropower plants and interconnectors and 236 transportation projects.
What actions could be taken to enhance the sustainability of transport infrastructure in Africa? 1. Adequate road maintenance. Effective functioning of road funds in Africa is critical in this regard. 2. Fully integrating climate risk analysis in the project cycle, in the feasibility studies of individual investments. 3. Developing technical guidelines on the integration of climate change in the planning and design of the infrastructure. 4. Establishing climate resilient projects, the preparatory facilities. 5. Launching training programs for climate resilient infrastructure. I recommend the ECA and the World Bank for their effort in this regard.
AFRI-RES is working with AUDA NEPAD and the African Union Commission to integrate climate resilience into the second phase of PIDA. At the same time, AFRI-RES is harnessing the resilience dividend to mobilize climate finance. Hence, together with the World Bank, is organizing a training on climate finance, which will be announced soon. Component 3 focuses on establishing climate-resilient infrastructure investment guidelines, standards, and best practices under the direction of the World Bank and the African Development Bank. The component has developed a comprehensive set of best practices and guidelines for incorporating climate risks into infrastructure planning and design across different sectors and stages of decision-making, from the policy level to sector-level planning and individual project design. The fourth component is on the AFRI-RES Climate Knowledge and Data Portal. This portal is a gateway to other climate data portals in Africa, providing access to a repository of climate data, tools, and services pertinent to the planning and design of climate-resilient investments. The portal is developed and managed through a partnership with the World Bank, the World Resources Institute, the Environmental System Research Institute, and the International Renewable Energy Agency, among others. In addition, the AFRI-RES facility has developed a self-paced, step-by-step resilience booster tool. The tool acts as a guide for those implementing climate resilient initiatives.
We all talk about resilience, but when we ask for a minute, what is resilience and how do we make sure that our project is actually delivering on resilience? What the Resilience Booster tool does, it is unpacks the concept of resilience into a set of 9 attributes. Not that every project has to address all the 9 attributes, but you begin to think about resilience. Is my project going to be more robust in terms of the infrastructure? Is it going to help me to diversify the livelihood options? Is it building a certain redundancy so that if a certain road is inaccessible in extreme weather, you have an alternative road? So it really is a self-paced online tool, and I invite all of you to look at it. You can use it to make sure your project is actually advancing the cause of resilience. And then it has qualitative ways of looking at it that you can actually measure that your project is more resilient. And this is important because this is the core of what AFRI-RES is.
AFRI-RES is a partnership between the African Union Commission, the UN Economic Commission for Africa, the World Bank, and the African Development Bank, supported by the Nordic Development Fund.
NDF has been a proud supporter of AFRI-RES since 2017. We provided a relatively modest grant of 5 million euro, which has come a long way, and really together with the World Bank, the African Development Bank, UNECA, the African Union Commission, has established AFRI-RES as an African Center of Excellence in the area of improving the planning, building capacities and technical expertise, both of public sector but also of private sector actors.
As the first phase of the program draws to a close, and we look forward to the next phase. And I hope that in the course of your stay here and the networking that is certainly happening, that we can mobilize more support to this initiative. It's critical, it's important given the capacity inadequacies that we have on the continent, our inabilities of our member states to have their own resources to respond to.